Representative works: Beloved. The novel Beloved is written by Toni Morrison. It is told through flashbacks. It is the story of an escaped slave, Satha. Her identity is defined by her love for her family. When she experiences the brutality of a school teacher, she decides to run. Out of mother love, she decides to kill her children rather to surrender them to enslavement. Beloved is murdered by her mother when the former master comes to reclaim them. First she haunts the family as the ghost of a baby. Later she returns as a grown-up girl to drive away her mother's new lover. Symbolically, she is the physical manifestation of generations of slaves. There are two considerations about the historical accuracy of the novel. The first is the use of contemporaneous accounts of slavery, and the second, Morrison's imaginative recreation of the slave society. The conflict between these two arises from the concern that the version of slavery produced by ruling white class is flawed, and that a fictional story is by definition unreal. Two events in the novel raise this issue. The first is the moment Paul D sees the newspaper clipping of Satha and remarks, "That ain't her mouth." If the news reports are not accurate, including the pictures, then the novel has relied on false information. The second incident is the scene in which Beloved lures Paul D into the shed to have sex. There is a stack of newspapers in the shed, a symbolic juxtaposition of the real and the imagined. The post-structuralist view that reality is a function of discourse is challenged in these scenes. The source of discourse is unreliable, and that leads to the conclusion that there is no reliable explication of reality present in these scenes, and by extrapolation in the novel itself. Cat's Cradle. Cat's Cradle is a humorous and sharp-edged novel that takes major institutions of society to task for their vapidity and shallowness: religion, the military, and science. These are the meta-narratives which are rejected by post-modern interpretation of reality. The chief image in the novel comes from its title, A Cat's Cradle, the finger game played by two people with a loop of string that can become twisted and tangled and end the game. Kanjar Selected Poems. Reed's 1972 book of poetry contains prose poems, didactic poems, and short poems offering comments on very specific incidents, such as the poem Report of the Reed Commission, which reads, "I conclude that for the first time in history, the practical man is the loon, and the loon the practical man. A man on the radio just said that air pollution is caused by jellyfish." Not all of his poetry is this transparent and humorous. Some, for example, explore what he sees as the oppressive nature of the American society in which he lives. His reference to hoodoo, which is a variation of voodoo, is a common theme in most of his writings. It combines aspects of conjuring, magic, and voodoo, which he claims will help African Americans and people in the Third World rid themselves of the oppressive nature of contemporary Western civilization. Of Grammatology. Of Grammatology is a difficult book that contains the basis for deconstructive analysis of language. Two of the more important issues raised in the book are logocentrism of language and the use of binary oppositions in Western culture. Logocentrism gives precedence to the spoken word over the written word. Derrida says that philosophies that claim that speech is a more natural form of language give speech the position of primacy. By doing so, writing is reduced to a secondary position. His argument is not that writing is not secondary, but that speech is not primary. A tricky way of equalizing these two components of language without setting up another binary set. Some may claim that writing is merely recorded speech, but Derrida argues the opposite. Speech is a form of unrecorded script. Here again he makes a careful argument to avoid the establishment of new hierarchies. The, the specific concern that he raises in this discussion is what he calls centering, the process of giving one term more importance than another. He shows that any text, no matter what kind, can be read in ways different from what it seems to be saying, which is the central proposition in his book. Communication is an unending series of textual meanings that arise and are subverted within themselves. Then the process repeats. The result of these repeated subversions of meaning is that no text is ever stable. Any stability in a text is merely illusory. The basis of his discussion is the signified relationship that comes from structuralism. This is a complicated relationship. This is the problem of writing, where a written word represents a spoken word that in turn represents the object. The movement from the one to the other is the structure of meaning, but because this movement conceals and erases itself during the very act of movement, it remains unstable. He says there is not a single signified that escapes, even if recaptured, the play of signifying references that constitute language. Hence, since a text has so many different meanings, it cannot have one single meaning. This is the basic conundrum of deconstruction. The very act of deconstruction is unstable and the results are indeterminate. Gravity's Rainbow. Pynchon's postmodern novel, Gravity's Rainbow, is set at the end of World War II. It tells the story of a quest of an unknown device that will be installed in a special rocket. Gravity's Rainbow is considered a difficult book to read because of its unconventional approach to plot, its cast of more than 400 characters, and its use of specialized scientific knowledge. It has attracted both admiration and criticism. It won the National Book Award in 1974. Overnight to Many Distant Cities. Overnight to Many Distant Cities is a collection of short stories. One of its stories, entitled Cortez and Montezuma, shows the minimalist character of Barthelme's writing style. Minimalism is a style that uses a small amount of text to create the tale. Much of this story consists of short, rapid-fire sentences, some of which have only 3 words, giving the reader a sense of urgency. In this manner, Barthelme retells the history of the Spanish conquest of Mexico using themes of trust and breaking trust. Another story from the same collection, The First Thing the Baby Did Wrong, is a humorous parable about the difficulties of living with immutable rules. The narrator says, if you made a rule, you had to stick to it. This points to the absurdity of a society that lives by rules that are not understood or well thought out before they are enforced. Postmodernism and Consumer Society. In his 1983 essay, Postmodernism and Consumer Society, Fredric Jameson explains his idea of postmodernism, its basic principles, and its causes. He discusses what he calls pastiche and schizophrenia as they relate to the emergent social order of late capitalism. Pastiche is the loss of personal identity, which may be the result of capitalism and bureaucracies that place no importance on the individual. Another aspect of this loss of identity lies in the possibility that there is no way for writers and artists to create new styles because they have already been invented. The other focus of the essay, Schizophrenia, is the clash of narratives resulting from the combination of the past and future in the present. Throughout this essay and others, Jameson takes considerable notice of the impact of capitalism on the course of social progress and current artistic expression. Desire in Language, a semiotic approach to literature and art. Professor Julia Kristeva is a philosopher and semiotician. She introduces gender politics into the postmodern discussion in Desire in Language, a semiotic approach to literature and art. First published in French in 1969 and translated into English in 1980. She proposes that unconscious drives are major factors in communication and language. She explains that in creating a text by writing, the author releases unconscious selves and destroys the former notion of a solid, traditional, logical self. She considers the formative possibilities of a feminine voice that can result. Kristeva looks at this issue of the feminine voice in the context of the dissolution of binary sets discussed by Derrida. She asserts that if customary language usage privileges one sex over another, as in the male-female set, it opens up the possibility of the marginalized sex eventually being eliminated from all discussions, though at the same time it provides means for women to raise their concerns if they use their status outside the mainstream. To conclude, it can be said that postmodern literature is marked by an attitude of skepticism. It raises questions as to the certainty of knowledge. Moreover, it brings us face to face with the fragmentary nature of reality. Thank you very much.